You may not know it, but you are actually religious. Yeah, you may not go to church, you may not go to synagogue, you may have nothing to do with formal religion, but you are religious. Stay tuned. This is Michael Shevack, and welcome to God Search. Welcome to God Search, where you're going to learn some of the rudiments about how to have the experience called God. Now, by the way, for those who are out there, this is the beginning right prior to the evening of Rosh Hashanah or the Jewish New Year. If it's important to anyone out there, it's important to me. But if it's important to anyone else out there, Happy New Year. May it be a lot better year than this past year, which was kind of iffy, if you ask me. So let's talk about what is religion. We were very, very clear at the very beginning of God Search that you have to be careful with the R word. And that's why a lot of people these days are not even using the R word. If you ask them, they say, well, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. And even the people who are religious like to say, well, I'm a kind of a spiritual Catholic or I'm a spiritual Muslim. Why are they saying that? The reason they're saying that is that religion, unfortunately, because of its inheritance, which is very complex, got lost in its own identity. It became lost in serving itself. And when it became lost into serving itself exclusively and not in the context of the larger world and creation and the ordering principles that we all live in, when it did that, it kind of disconnected from reality. It was all in its own head, all in its own head. The beautiful thing about the American experiment with its natural law is that it opened things up to the living experience of life. And if you remember anything about our early stages in God Search, we talked about life is our authority. Our experience from life is the authority on our God Search. Now, last podcast, we talked about how, in a very real sense, everything is perfect. It is per facere. It is being created and materialized right in front of our eyes, what we might call the creator or the living creative process of all existence is happening every moment by moment, and it is perfectly ordered. It is perfection itself, though not in the sense of the ideal that we have on the inside of us as human beings. It is per facere. It is being created. It is being turned into a material fact. To that, we add human existence and human civilization, such as the need for purple suspenders and all sorts of very interesting affectations that are totally human. The combination of these two things in a living process of life, a living process of life, which we're calling spiritual, and it is the first aspect of what we're talking about called covenant. The combination of the two are what creates, shall we say, the religious methodology. The religious methodology. You know, I had a very, very good friend. He was the founder of one of the most conservative Catholic organizations. It was a youth movement in Italy, Monsignor Luigi Giussani, who was the founder of Comunione e Liberazione. And he was the one who used that phrase, religious methodology. If you're Catholic, by the way, I highly suggest you read his books. They're extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. His trilogy is extraordinary. Um, so the combination of knowing that we are in a continuously magnificent materializing reality that is creative and to which we are adding our own desires, our own creativities, and creating and adding to that creates the religious experience. Now, we talked about that insofar as that when human beings use our ability to be creative for ourselves, and we use it in a way that's disharmonious with the design and the laws of this particular scale of reality. We can't know all scales, but this particular one, we can have difficulties. such as, an automobile that pollutes the air, which is the example we gave. We could also have another thing that goes wrong, such as enslavement of people. We can have other things that go wrong, such as education of false ideas that later on create destructive political movements. There could be many, many things that go wrong. And by saying wrong, we're not sitting on a pulpit going, you're bad, which is old time religion. What we're saying is that your actual living choices and actions have an actual living effect upon the world that we witness, and therefore you experience more good or less good. Another way to say that is less evil or more evil. Okay? They're relative. Whether you take it from the addition of evil and the subtraction of evil, or you express it from the standpoint of the increase of good or the decrease of good, these are relative phenomena. Now, in the process of being alive, you do experience clearly things that are more pleasant and less pleasant, things that are more good or less than good. We experience mistakes where we have taken an idea and an understanding and we've acted on it. And that mistake, the taking of a falsity as truth when acted on, creates a mistake or a pretty bad little mess that we step in. We have to clean our shoes off of. So this kind of phenomenon happens all the time. And we also have the capacity, because we have a goodly amount of memory, not enormously, but a good amount of memory, to go backwards into the recent past, and we can construct a linear understanding between what was and what happens, and we create an understanding of events that have a meaning, a meaning. And that is how we learn. If you're on a God search, when you're part of life, you're on a God search. That is how we learn how life works for good, what to do so that you're in alignment or covenant with the design of this world, or how life works when you act disaligned or malaligned or unaligned with how life works for good. And you create something that is less than pleasant. So here you're talking about the emergence of something very, very exciting. It's the emergence of not religious laws, meaning don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, but you're seeing the emergence of the natural foundation to what is law, what becomes eventually religious law or moral law. Okay, what happens is we are having a living, breathing, interrelational alliance with the design of life. Our activities work with it or work in conflict with it, but within it. And we create good or bad, and we can witness the effect of that, and we can draw conclusions between our actions and what takes place. This is built into the design of life. Some people have called it a natural law. A natural law, meaning it is built into the design of life. It's built into quote unquote nature on earth, spelled out with a small n. It's very problematic to use nature as a big thing unless you really are careful about enunciating the scale that you're talking about. And these things, these are boundaries that are designed into life itself, and they're called natural laws. And the founding fathers of the United States drew on a kind of natural law philosophy, though they varied things and made a few mistakes, which is why we're suffering a little in the US. But we'll get to that eventually. But these things are built into life, to which we will add a human created law, such as speed limits on highways. The earthly nature didn't give us any highways. Human beings invented it. So we have laws that are for humans, created especially for humans. And these are generally called positive laws if you're in a legal academics. And remember, the academic environment and the legal environment we have is really very much an offshoot of Roman law with a little Jewish sacred history and ethics sprinkled in. It's very interesting evolution. So you have these two aspects to what is called in the New Age community manifestation. I manifested my desire, or I manifested this, and this didn't manifest correctly. And in the New Age community, you'll often see people going back and they're analyzing their minds, figuring out what programs they have on the inside of them that were not seen and that were underneath the surface that caused them to act a certain way and that acted in misalignment or disalignment or unalignment to the way life is created, that created a less than good manifestation. This is commonly called New Age philosophy, but it is really old age. It is old age. It is the foundation of religion. It is the foundation of what is commonly called, through using the Christian description, which is very Jewish, but those phrases very associated with the Christian scripture, which is sowing and reaping. This is the fundamental foundation to the religious experience. And when you look backwards and employ this methodology, you have the ability to weigh your actions and not weigh your actions, see what works, see what doesn't work. And in a very practical way, life becomes your teacher on what works and what doesn't work. Life becomes your instructor. Now, okay, some people would like to say that life is God and God is teaching me through suffering, such as, and they might use distasteful phrases like God punished me, which can be abused by very, very neurotic people to squash you and to take away your freedom. But you don't want to abuse that phrase. But in fact, there's a goodly amount of truth to it. Life, or that which is living reality that we participate in, is ordered a certain way so that it produced a result when we acted in a certain way in accordance with it. And that result was less than savory. Old time religion would say, you sinned, God punished you. New Age religion is, you had an obstruction in your consciousness or an erroneous belief system, which you sowed and reaped and manifested and discovered its limitation. These are phenomenally identical descriptions. The language has changed, but they are describing how life works, using one with more religious teaching language and one with more spiritual language. But the phenomenon is the same. This is the foundation behind all religions everywhere in the entire world, because it's not the foundation of religion. It's the foundation of life. It's how life works. And religious teachings are kind of a framework for a certain class of life activities that are devotional. They're designed to help open you up to more rarefied levels of consciousness. They are there to help you learn how to train your actions, so to guide yourself, your family, your community, your nation, and the world. If you're historical on a universal level, that's what the purpose of that is. And out of these understandings, these little anecdotal things about how life, reacts to your behavior, come generalized rules that eventually are so general and so good and so reliable, it's as if they're pronounced from the top of a mountain, like Moses on Mount Sinai. That's one I like. And they become generalized laws which can be put into legal frameworks, part of a system. They can be written up as general rules, whether they're in a scripture or in a constitution. And this is where we get our legal system from. And this is where we get religious laws from, whether they're Jewish laws, Islamic laws, or whether they are just secular, so-called secular laws. Their foundation is based upon the living experience of life, basically what works and what doesn't. Now, here we're going to lose another big, massive mind crack. Remember mind cracks? They're the things that give us problems, where we're describing reality differently than it actually is. We have a tendency these days, and the more materialist our society gets, the more we get entrenched in this mind crack, is that there are things that are practical and there are things that are idealistic. You see, on a true God search, there are things that are practical and there are things that are religious or idealistic. But on a true God search, these things interweave. They're very delicate. Okay. On a true God search, yes, you can have ideals and you can have what's the expedient or the practical way to deal with it so that you cause the least harm and the greatest results. But they're not the mind crack that commonly is in place, that let's be practical about this, has to do with the price of beans. And this is idealism. Well, that's pie in the sky. You know, it's too rarefied, too ethereal. Let's not deal with it. This disjunction, this opposition, this radical contrast between practicality and idealism is a sickness. It's a sickness. The great thing about the American system is that it allowed a freedom and a material exploration so that people could live within reality, within the structure of freedom, to discover what is practical and create an ideal out of what is practical in real time, or conversely, what is the ideal, and then live it, practically speaking, through everyday praxis or everyday practice, and create the ideal in the flesh, in our bodies, in our families, and materially in our free enterprise system, which is a glorious, glorious thing. This delusion that there's practical stuff and idealism, and they're opposed to each other, is the result of someone who is lost in a mind crack. It is not part of an authentic God search. There is practical parts. As I said before, there is ideals within an authentic God search. They just emerge from the process, or you bring them into it as part of your desires, but they're not in opposition. They're not in opposition. The opposition is usually 100% the result of someone who is not spiritually advanced enough. Their consciousness is not sufficiently elevated so that they don't know how to bring these together. Now, how do you bring the practical together with the ideal? So here's some hints. One, slow down. Slow down. Stop spinning your wheels in your head. This is a reality that is material. It produces material results. And if you slow down and slow your mental process, and you're working to what takes place moment to moment. So what takes place in the body, what takes place materially, every moment, and not just the timing of the gerbils on the wheels in your head, you will notice that the practical aspects and the ideal aspects begin to work together in harmony. Why? Because we as human beings don't create in a vacuum. There is an ordering principle here. Some people call that God. Some people these days call it the universe. It's an issue of scale. We'll talk about that more down the road, scale. But nonetheless, there's an ordering principle here, and there is a way that life works. And if you slow down for the quote unquote creator or the creative process or the universal creativity, call it anything you want. I don't want to get lost in a religious war. If you slow down and work in what these days we call real time, not imagined computer time, but real time, you'll notice that these things have a way of merging together, and the practical aspects and the ideal aspects interfuse. They work with each other, they help each other. Why? Because it's human need to create something which is more perfected, working with that which already is perfect, meaning it's our creativity coming into tandem with the creativity that already exists before we act upon it. And this very process of moving in real time is co-operative. We're working together and we're learning the dynamics of how to work together. We're learning how to align the practical and the ideal and bring them together. And this is what creates the spiritual phenomenon that is the foundation of covenant and the foundation of everything else. As I said before, certainly moral laws and legal laws, which we'll talk about. But I think it might be very, very important, since we're talking about the merging of practicalities and legalities, to again mention that sometimes we are forced to do something which is ethical and not exactly right. Okay. I think I mentioned it before. You know, if you a trial lawyer who knows that their client is a mass murderer, for sure, is ethically bound to make sure that that murderer gets off, because the system works that way. And they're required to affirm the system and work within the system. So they have to do what is ethical for an attorney. We all have these very practical dilemmas that emerge because we're working within the system. Okay. People do it all the time when they're trying to figure out how to apply the general principles of the IRS laws in terms of what is deductible and what is not deductible. It goes on all the time. But what's ethical is you have to pay attention with respect for what already exists in our world and work along with it and do your best job to work along with it, or the whole system collapses. If the whole system collapsed, the suffering would be enormous. So the practicality that takes place when you're exploring the religious methodology, which is really natural law spirituality, that practicality does emerge where you have to deal with and support a relatively dysfunctional system, one that needs to be perfected, which needs to grow. Okay. But it hasn't been perfected yet and it hasn't grown. And so you have to operate within it because we all need that. It's kind of like, you know, we drive a car that destroys our atmosphere until they perfect an electric car. And then we gradually have to switch cars. In the meantime, we do what is most ethical. We drive the cars that destroy the atmosphere anyway, because if we stopped, the whole system would drop. And then what we have to do is very gradually grow the whole so that the cars become improved and people now can have their mobility in a way that is more harmonious with the laws of creation. So you could say that what is commonly called ethics, right? And this word ethics is often confused with morality, and people define these two in many, many different ways. I'm doing it my way. This issue of ethics emerges when you have a necessary falsity. Okay. It's a kind of necessary falsity where you are pushed into something which isn't right, but you kind of have to do it for the sake of the entirety of the whole. And this is one of the dilemmas of being human. When you take that in a very extreme, out of place context where the ethics is not there for good, for the experience of the improvement of life, but you use it to enslave people, then people have to do what is ethical to support the whole when the whole may be so wrongful and so cruel and so extremely not good that what you're doing is supporting an evil empire by doing what's ethical. There's a big difference between supporting an evil empire that is there to tear down life, tear down goodness, and, defending someone who you know is a mass murderer, but it's kind of your job as an attorney. They're both, defective. You both have to handle the practicality of the human order existing and then needing to be improved upon. But in one place, the system has goodness to it and really functions. On the other, the system is designed to enslave and betray the gift of the human spirit. I hope I'm making myself clear because this is very, very subtle. See, the fact is we oftentimes have such a mind crack where we oppose one thing to the other and one thing to the other, and this is opposed to this, and this is wrong, and this is right, and this is right, and this is wrong, that we don't oftentimes see the reality of life, that there are in seemingly good think, things that are not right, and that these same things, when they go to an extreme or an excess, will produce the experience of life's goodness in the form of unpleasantness, in the form of destruction, in the form of chaos, in the form of disorder, in the form of what we commonly call evil. You see? So, what you're doing when you enter into the God search, the kind of living natural law relationship with life, is you're learning how to negotiate your own will with the will that exists in you, around you, between you, with other facets of life besides yourself. It's not just, an internal relationship inside of you. It's not just your holy self with a capital S. That's true in the meditation experience. But on the outer world, you're constantly going to get challenges depending on your degree of your beliefs. And implied in that is the society that you're a part of. What part of society are you? You may be against air pollution, but if you don't own a car, you'll take a cab or an Uber, and in which case you're participating in the same way with burning gasoline. So we have to give each other a break. All of the people who are involved in strident religions that are always damning people and saying, you're a sinner, you're this. We got to cut each other some slack. Good people make mistakes continuously and in fact oftentimes are forced to make mistakes that are not the ideal because of the world that we operate in. And bad people who aim at undermining and destroying and hurting other people for their own self, bad people oftentimes can achieve many, many good things in the process of doing evil. I mean, I'm not going to mention names. It was a very famous mafia guy who was really wonderful, took care of his community in Queens. He was really kept it safe and clean and really, really nice and was beloved by the people around him. Of course, the funds for doing that came from all sorts of illicit things, such as prostitution and drugs. Okay. So even that kind of evil can produce a goodness. It is not quite as black and white, as good and evil, as religionism, the religion that tries to sell religions, likes to portray it. So when you enter into the rudimentary stages of covenant, right, where you're exploring your relationship with the experience called God, be aware that there is a complexity and a dynamism and a unique learning experience. And it's not just about you personally deprogramming your brain so you manifest reality correctly. It's a matter of doing that and also understanding that we are reliant on each other. We are reliant on society. I'm reliant on the electricity in order to be able to speak to you, and that we all have to work together in the way that creates the least harm and the greatest advantage for ourselves. And well, here you go again, value priorities, no, relationship priorities, yourself and all others, future generations, all life and creation. And you have to have continual improvement, continual improvement. The same thing is your relationship, your value priorities. You have to aim for health, peace, freedom, wisdom, uh, the expression of your fullest potential. And of course, you know, abundance, prosperity. These are all things that are important. You will discover as you continue your God search and as you sow and reap and have this kind of everyday natural or religious experience, whether you're involved formally in a religion or not, it's still part of life. You'll discover that the value priorities and the relationship priorities, when they go bad, it's because you didn't, you know, sow and reap and use your creativity correctly. And what happens is a lot of these problems with relationships and these problems with values pop up, and they kind of give you a little kick in the butt to make you wake up and realize that you can improve. I just generalized the value priorities and the relationship priorities to help you recognize and understand quicker and more effectively really what is the meaning of things that go supposedly wrong, right? Now, just remember, even though they go wrong, meaning they're not pleasant and they cause suffering, and I'm not minimizing that by any means at all. Even though they go wrong, it is still a wrong that is occurring within the living reality that we're living. Things do not go wrong out of the clear blue sky. They go wrong within the design that exists. It's not imposed from the outside. It's just not knowing how to open a door because you don't realize what direction the hinge moves in. If you don't understand how life works, you're not going to learn how to live and sow and reap and have an effective God search. Learning how these things work and removing some of the impediments to how you think is an important part of enhancing your life search, which is why I have been concentrating on it. The other reason is there's a tendency amongst the rabbinic community to have a sense of humor and be very nice, but also be a little pedantic about teaching things. We on the pulpit, that kind of stuff. It's part of the cultural norm that I'm a part of. So excuse me if I'm getting a little too teachy or preachy, but it's kind of oftentimes it's an occupational hazard. By the way, please, I have a social media guy. I know nothing about social media. It's an advertising industry that is after my time. I was just, basically a TV guy. I was in Madison Avenue. I created Gillette, the best a man can get. I wrote that line. And, I don't know much about social media, but I'm told that I have to communicate by social media. So I have one of my students, Scotty, is helping me chop this stuff up and send it out there. And I'm getting word that it's appearing in things that are called Instagrams and TikToks and all these things that I absolutely really know nothing about. So please excuse my ignorance. I have been busy learning other things. But if you get these little messages, please use them to prod your little fingers and go to something I am familiar with, which is, a website, and go to yourgodsearch.com and please check me out and let's have a conversation. There are also some books in the publications section that I wrote that I think you might find very valuable for anchoring this information. And I think that's it. And I actually think, given the fact that it is New Year's, Jewish New Year's, and this is depending on the interpretation, this is either the creation of the world, that marks the creation of the world, mythologically, of course, poetically, or it's the creation of human, you know, the decision amongst the early rabbis, which one was it? They always had two opinions. More, if you're lucky, you only had two opinions. Usually, you had more opinions. But that's what we've been talking about for the past two podcasts. Is that creation is perfect? It just does what it needs to do, and then human beings build upon that, and we can add our goodness, and we can subtract some goodness. We can make mistakes, and we can amplify goodness. We can amplify the evil, all of which is in the possibility of this extraordinary texture and design. If you look at Deuteronomy chapter 30, I think it's verses 15 to 17, it says it succinctly that in front of us, in the reality we are, on the scale we are, we're given the possibility of good and the possibility of evil, that we should favor the goodness, choose the good, choose the good. All right? That's what we're talking about here. Not getting lost in mind cracks, but choosing the good, assessing them, cleaning ourselves up so we do more good, and then sowing and reaping and interacting with life so that what is perfect becomes more perfected for human life. That is the religious methodology that is built into the design of life. It is natural law, and that is the foundation of positive law, or which is part of our society as well. Let's protect our children, put up a speed. So it's a positive law based on a natural law. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. It's Michael Shevack again. And every Wednesday, it's about 7:45 a.m. on Eastern time. I'm there. Continue your God search. Keep working at it. The more you keep yourself tuned and the more you be aware of the messages life is teaching you when things go less than good, and the more you change and grow, it's a positive feedback thing. It's like a thermostat on the heat. The nicer and more beautiful your experience of life will be. And that is the experience called God. So uncover God, discover God. And this is the easiest and most beautiful way to recover God, by discovering God at its core and most pristine foundation, built into the design of life. And life is our authority. Don't worry and don't get too caught up in poorly enunciated religious teachings. This is Michael Shevack. Take care. See you next week. God bless.